Good morning. So I've got started building just a little proxy scene. So I've got a plane that I duplicated. So these have the exact same UVs. This is gonna be my grass elements, and I've created, like just a basic sidewalk and street and a little walkway and whatnot. The grass, I'm just gonna label those at least. So grass, geo, just grass one. I'll just put it at the end, and then I can just copy this. That'll automatically go to grass 2. There we go. Oh, but that's the wrong thing. Let's see, that's grass 1. That's grass 2. All right. There we go. Got my 2 grasses. And then we got our walkway and stuff like that. So I'm just going to leave them. All right, let's call it cement. Cement, Geo1. All right. For now, I'll just kind of go with that. So I'm going to apply some grass to this. Now I'm going to be using the interactive groom splines. That's this section right here. So this is a bit different than the older Xgen. It just makes it easier to connect the redshift shaders, and it works a little bit better with referencing. There's some considerations we still need to make. You can't have a gazillion hairs and expect things to render properly. So if you're going something with a bit more of a stylized look and feel, then we probably can get away with fewer hairs, and that'll just expedite rendering and working and all that stuff. So I'm going to select the one piece of geometry, my grass geo, and again, because there's a walkway, I can get away with smaller sections of grass, and I can just duplicate this geo for any area that needs to have grass in it. And once I've got it looking proper on this geometry, I can just save out a preset of that grass and reapply it to similar geometry with the same UVs. It just is, if the UVs are the same, it makes it really easy to copy. You'll get exactly the same look. All right, so let's add in our grass. So I'm going to go in here. So that's this guy right here, our Xgen Interactive Groom Splines menu. And I'm going to start by creating my interactive groom splines. Now the settings here are going to vary depending on the scale of your set. I have a fairly large set, so it's not quite physically accurate, but this is several feet across by several feet. If you were just kind of modeling things to the size of the grid, these density settings might be a bit different, and same with the length and width. So at the moment, maybe I'll increase that to a value of 1. This is what we're going to get. So if I go and click the create button, so I don't want it any denser than that, and in fact, that's probably too dense, but maybe it's okay for what I need. Maybe it's okay for what I need. So then what I'm going to do is just go in and start shaping this. Now the ground, I am going to put on a redshift material on this. So let me just go in and assign a new material to both of these guys. It'll just be the same material on both, or all your ground elements. And I probably don't need any specularity, so I'll just get rid of that altogether. So just turn all that stuff off. Roughness, if I did have it, would be very high. So it's not shiny grass, it'd be more diffused, specular. The color, I'm going to give it a grass color, like a bit more of a green color. Now that said, I don't want necessarily just a solid green. I just want some slight green variations. And it'll just create a bit more of a natural look, I'm hoping, once we apply the same texture to the grass. So what's a good one for that? Something like noise or kind of a ramp would be good. So if I went with noise, we have our noise pattern here. So what I can do is I can, just change this up just a bit. There we go, just so I have some nice variations going on. And then I can go into the color balance and just change the black and white to grass colors. So, the black might be a darker green and the white might be a slightly lighter green. Right? So, and the white would be slightly lighter. And this will just add a little bit of variation. So it doesn't look just like a flat CG-esque, like 1980s CG type of plane of flat plane. All right. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to apply the exact same shader to the grass. I can get away with that. or maybe I should wait. I'll wait until I save this out as a preset. So let me just keep going. So what I'm going to do next is go into my grass. Now there is a material, just a physical hair material here, which you can adjust the root and tip color. I think there is a new Redshift material in the newest version, which you don't have on the school computer. So we're just dealing with a solid color. But what the cool thing is that we can have it inherit the color variations of the texture that's on there. So I'm going to go in and just grab that for now and just put it on here so we get a better sense of what this is going to look like. So let me go into, not the render, there we are, Hypershade, and we have our noise right there. And what I'm going to do is apply that to the grass physical hair shader. So that's just going to go here under root color. And I'll put it under the tip color as well, just so that it's consistent. Cool. So now our grass is taking on. We can kind of see it here, the pattern of the whatever the texture is we have on there. This can be modified. We can change it to whatever we want it to be. So I'm just going to reduce down some of these highlights just on the physical shader. We don't really need those. Okay, so next thing I want to do is start shaping the grass and maybe give it some alternating heights and things like that. So I think I'm done with the Hypershade for now. Back over to our description. So we can go in and under the description, this is where we can change things like the overall thickness, right? So I can start thinning it up just a bit. Right, so something a bit more like this gives it a bit of dimension. It doesn't have to be like super dense, and having some gaps in there is pretty good. Most lawns have that. It's actually looking pretty good. We could add a little bit of a taper. Now there's an overall taper, which just makes it just like a little cone shape, a little triangular shape. Or if it's more like grass, we can kind of give it a bit more of a natural taper, where it might be just a little bit more square and then just taper down slightly near the end. That's something that's kind of grass-like. You can kind of see there, right? So, if it was grass, this would be more random. But usually it's not going to go to a fine point like that. Well, it could, I guess, right? If it's not cut grass, it ends up growing to a fine point. But if it's been manicured and cut, then that's not usually what happens. But you could always do that, right? And we could expand out the leafiness of this too by changing the profile. So this shape is basically the profile of what the grass takes on. So it'll kind of adhere to whatever shape this is, right? And we can just remove elements by clicking on these X's there. All right, so that's already looking pretty good. I wonder I'm just going to grab a light and see what this looks like, because we can still do some things. Like we can add in a little bit of randomization still into it, and I can do that a couple ways. So we have scale, so we could randomize scale, and then we probably just paint that instead of using a map for that. Density multiplier, so we can play around with density, which is another thing that we could add to. Or we could just go over here and start adding things. So I'm going to add in, say, maybe a noise. So add modifier, noise. Now we don't want these to be curly grasses, so we just got to be careful with the amount of noise or the type of noise we add to this. But I am going to add in, let's see here. Here's the noise. Let me just go into my attribute editor. So we can play around with things like the frequency. The higher the frequency, the more curls it's going to add. So we're dealing with a really low level frequency. We can go into things like magnitude, right? So that just increases the effect. So we could just kind of randomize things just a smidge, so they're not all perfectly straight up and down. That's looking pretty cool. Yeah, and that's probably all we really need. So we can also kind of control the effects of where that noise is happening. If we want it over the entire shape of the grass, we could get rid of the high point, right? So right now it's happening more on the ends and less on the base, or we could have it equally kind of happen along the entire grass blade. So you can play around with that a bit, but you don't have to get too involved with that. Clumping, we could do that, but you know, I think this is looking pretty grass-like. That looks pretty good. Cool. You know, and if the color variation's too much, you know, it's just an easy thing of just going back into that same texture. Like all of those things are sharing the same texture here. And, you know, I could just go in and modify that. So, you know, that light color, maybe I can make it a bit darker, right? So there's less variation. Or that dark color, maybe I can make this a little bit lighter, right? So there's a little bit of leeway we can kind of get into kind of playing with how glowy that grass color is going to be, right? But you do want a little bit of variation, or it's just going to be just a solid, it's just going to look too solid. We could also go in and apply in some longer bits. So I could use my placement brush, which is this guy, I believe. Let me see here. Yep, add single hairs. So I can add in a single hair, right? So I could go in and do that. So if I go into my size, you know what? Let me do this one instead. I think it's this guy. Nope, that creates an entire description. This guy, process of elimination. Here we go. So this one will add in density based off of my brush. Now, seems to not want to go over here, which is a bit annoying. It's almost as if it's going by the smooth settings of this. So, so if I were to add in more edges, like if I were to go back into my poly modeling and add in just maybe another edge here, yeah, that made it even worse. Yeah, because if I were to smooth my polygon out, you know, it would round out the corners there, and I would get that result. You know, it's not the end of the world. What I could do though is I could just, there, I do have it selected. I could just have it tuck. There we go. Just tuck under there, just a bit. Technically, it should be on a bit of a. There should be a little bit of a raised element in the middle of this anyway, right? Just so it's not completely flat. All right, that looks even better, right? Once we have that in there. I'm not going to worry too much about that. You see that in a real yard, right? It doesn't have to be perfectly machined to the exact corner. So again, with shadow and rendering, that's not something that would ever be noticeable for what you're doing with your shot. So we could add some varying height. So there are some additional brushes here. I wouldn't comb the grass. You know, just having it stick straight up is fine. You could go in and scale the odd little clump here and there. Maybe, you know, where things would naturally kind of get locked down. So you can do it either through a floating approach, which just kind of paints over areas, or what you could do is a locked approach, and basically anything within the influence of the brush ends up getting scaled just by moving it back and forward. And maybe this is a better approach for getting little clumpy bits. So you get like these odd little raised elements, right? And it doesn't have to be a big brush; it could be a narrower brush if you just want the odd little bit sticking up here and there. But you know, just do it in a natural looking way. Right, so you get these little tufts kind of sticking up. You could always add just other descriptions in there, but you know, you just want to do something that's going to be kind of natural. So, you know, usually around areas that are harder to cut, it'll be a little bit higher. So if you have any kind of little garden or little walls that might be containing a garden, you know, it might grow a little bit higher in those areas. Right? So you can kind of get a little bit more variation, natural variation that way. Cool. And let me just throw in a dome light and see how that looks. If it looks good, I'll show you how to save a preset. We can apply it to this guy, and we're done. All right, easy peasy. So let's see. And let me grab a redshift dome light. And I'm just going to throw on a default HDRI image just for this, so I don't have to fuss around with my lighting so much. Alright, something, just the default substance lighting. And let me just do an IPR. Alright, so at the moment my grass is going to render black. So you're thinking, well, I see green. The green's just the redshift material underneath there. The hair material doesn't render, so the thing we're seeing there. So we have a couple options. You could put a hair material on there, but you know, grass isn't hair. It's I would just go in and, to be honest, just throw the same material that's on the ground. So I'm going to select the description, go down to my redshift material, and probably a good idea to label these things. That has the ground on it, which I think is this guy. And if I apply that, and let me see, redo my render. Now, I did notice in this version of Maya that I'm using, or it's actually probably this version of Redshift, hair doesn't seem to update unless I reopen it. It's a bit of a bug. This isn't the same Redshift you're using at the school. But again, let me just make sure that I even applied that though in the first place. So let's go into my attribute editor, go to the end. Yeah, so that's the, I'll call it grass material, just so I know exactly what that is. I'm going to save this out, so save scene as. Unfortunately, I'm using the NVIDIA recording software that came with the graphics card, so I don't think I can pause the recording, so you're just going to have to bear with me as I save this in here. So I'll just call it grass, and I'm going to reopen the file. There we go. You can see it just automatically updates, and you know, that's actually looking pretty good. Looks like grass. Now this area I kind of scaled up a bit, and yeah, there it is there. You know, maybe that wasn't the best scale there, but it looks like a divot cut into the grass around that. But yeah, there it is there. So there is a smooth brush. It's a bit fussy though, but maybe I'll try using it. So let me see here. Which is the smooth brush? So this one changes the width, angle. Let's see, let me just pause this recording so I can see stuff. It's this one, straighten hair, smooth. Okay, here it is, smooth. Now, this is the one feature I really like with the old Xgen. It had a really nice smooth function where you could just kind of smooth in, it would just blend perfectly. Yeah, this one, not so much. So I'm just wondering if we can, this is just curvature, but I want to smooth the length. Smooth orientation. All right, let me just see if this works. So it's just this guy right here. I want to go over top of. Yeah, it's smoothing it down a bit. Cool. All right, cool. So now we've got less hair. So let's try that, or smoother hair. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now you can see we probably have way too many hairs still. I mean, it looks pretty good. I mean, that looks like pretty good looking grass. There we go. Just smoothing out some of those clumps. And that looks way better. So that looks pretty good. Maybe there's too many hairs, right? So if there's too many, remember, the fewer the hairs we have, the faster the renders. So, you know, we can see what we can get away with, because, you know, maybe we don't need it to be that dense for something stylized. So it's just a matter of going back over to Xgen, Interactive Groom tab. And we've got our base. Now this is the density on the base here. So I can go in and maybe start decreasing my density multiplier. You know, if I go by half, it's going to give me half the hairs. And you can see that, you know, it doesn't look much different, to be honest, right? But the key difference is that it's going to render a lot faster. Now it depends on how fast or how close we need to be on this. If this is just something off in the distance, I mean, that looks pretty good, right? And there's a clear difference between this and this, right? This flat plane, right? This definitely has more of a realistic grassy feel. This looks like a flat piece of geometry.